Gate 4 of Diddy's trial didn't start with fireworks. No dramatic entrance, no surprise witness, just the usual shuffling of papers, hushed whispers, and the steady ticking of courtroom routine.
Diddy sat at the defense table, sharply dressed in his tailored suit, leaning in occasionally to whisper to his attorneys. Everything seemed normal, calm, controlled. But all of that was about to change.
Because prosecutors were holding something back. And when they decided to reveal it, everything exploded. It started with one announcement. The prosecution asked to present new evidence. Text messages between Diddy and Cassie. Messages that had not been previously disclosed. At first, the room didn't react. It sounded procedural. Just another document drop.
Then the prosecutor held up a folder, and the energy shifted. Even before the texts were read aloud, Diddy's reaction said everything. A reporter in the room described it like watching someone come apart. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face. His breathing grew shallow, quick, shoulders rising and falling rapidly. His hands, once calmly folded, now clenched the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned white.
15 years covering celebrity trials, said one veteran journalist, and they had never seen someone lose their composure that fast. Diddy wasn't just rattled. He was spiraling. As the prosecutor began explaining what the text contained, Diddy shoved his chair back and stood up. Fast, abrupt, like he couldn't stop himself. One of his attorneys reached out to stop him, but he pulled away, taking 2 quick steps toward the bench.
That's when chaos broke out. 2 defense attorneys jumped to their feet, one placing himself directly between Diddy and the judge. Court officers moved instantly. The judge slammed the gavel. Once, twice, again, calling for order as Diddy muttered angrily under his breath, his words growing louder with every step. He wasn't yelling yet, but he was close. People in the first row could hear the words, just not clearly. A witness described it as low, heated, and getting more intense. Diddy's lead attorney gripped his shoulder, whispering hard into his ear, guiding him back to a seat. The judge ordered a recess. 15 minutes. But the damage? Already done. This wasn't just another courtroom moment. This was the moment Diddy lost control, in front of everyone. 15 minutes passed, but the tension in the room didn't budge. Diddy's outburst had changed the temperature of the trial.
When court resumed, the atmosphere was different, quieter, heavier. Eyes weren't just watching the evidence now, they were watching him. The prosecutor stood and cleared their throat. "Your Honor," they said, "we are now submitting communication records recovered from Mr. Combs' personal mobile device. These include text conversations between Mr. Combs and the plaintiff, Cassandra Ventura, dated across a span of 6 years." The judge gave a short nod. The gallery leaned in. The jurors straightened slightly in their chairs. Then the screen lit up. The first messages weren't explosive. They were controlling. "Where are you? Why didn't you answer? If you want to keep this going, you need to stop playing games. Remember who gave you everything." There were dozens more, each one painting a picture that was impossible to ignore. Not just of a relationship, but of control, pressure, emotional manipulation. And then came the line that pulled the air out of the room.
"If you leave, I'll make sure no one ever works with you again." Gasps. Not dramatic, but real. Quiet. The kind of sound a courtroom makes when everyone realizes what they're reading isn't just evidence. It's a confession. Diddy didn't react to that one. Not visibly, but reporters later noted that he didn't look up once after that message appeared. His eyes were fixed on a table in front of him, his jaw tight, his right leg bouncing uncontrollably under the desk. More messages followed. Some were late-night texts, erratic, jealous, pleading. Others were cold and clipped, threatening. But the one that truly shifted the courtroom came next. "Ye signed your life to me. Don't forget that." A moment of silence. Then the prosecutor turned to the judge. "These are just a portion of over 200 messages recovered. We believe they support the plaintiff's claims of emotional coercion and professional retaliation."
Cassie sat silently, eyes lowered, but she didn't look shaken. She looked relieved, like she had carried the weight of those words for years, and now the courtroom could finally feel it too. Diddy's attorneys tried to object, claiming the messages lacked context, that they were cherry-picked. But it was too late, because the context wasn't needed anymore. The jury had already started putting the puzzle together, and the picture was looking nothing like the man Diddy had worked so hard to portray. The defense team was scrambling. After the texts were read, the room wasn't just tense, it was different. Something had shifted. Jurors weren't glancing at Diddy anymore. They were watching his lawyers, watching how they reacted. waiting to see what excuse would come next. And for the first time, the defense didn't have one.
They asked for a sidebar, huddling near the bench. Their whispers were fast, panicked. The judge listened, nodded once, and then leaned back in her chair with a long exhale. Overruled, she said. The messages are admissible. That was the moment the case stopped being just about Cassie's word against Diddy's reputation. It became something real, documented, visible, time-stamped, and public. Because outside the courtroom, those texts were already making the rounds. Media outlets posted screenshots within minutes. Social platforms lit up with posts like, "He really said this?" Years of rumors, and now we've got proof. This is chilling. I believe her. People who once stayed quiet, afraid to speak out, or unsure what to believe, started weighing in. Former associates, industry insiders, even fans. And inside the courthouse, things kept spiraling. Cassie's attorney quietly handed a new motion to the judge. A request to call an additional witness.
Someone who had received similar messages. Someone who had been in Diddy's orbit. Someone willing to testify that this wasn't a one-time thing. The judge took the motion, scanned it, and nodded. We'll revisit this before the close of today's session. Diddy didn't say a word, but the reaction from his team said plenty. The lead attorney put a hand over his mouth, whispering hard into his colleague's ear. Another pulled out their phone and typed something quickly. Everyone on that side of the room looked like they were playing defense now. Not just in strategy, but in survival. Because here's the truth. The trial was still in motion, but the narrative, it had already begun to collapse. And in a room where Diddy once carried all the presence, all the weight, he now looked smaller, more isolated, more exposed.
By the end of the day, the courtroom felt like a pressure cooker. The prosecution had carefully constructed a timeline, lining up Cassie's testimony with the text messages, hotel logs, canceled performances, and sudden changes in her public appearances. The picture that emerged wasn't abstract anymore. It was detailed, coordinated, undeniable. The jurors watched closely as dates were circled, connections drawn, and for every time Diddy had claimed Cassie was spiraling or difficult, the text told a different story, one of manipulation disguised as concern and threats disguised as love. The courtroom saw it, and so did Diddy. He didn't interrupt again, didn't slam the table, but he sat there, silent and red-faced, refusing to look toward the gallery. The man who had once commanded every room now looked like he just wanted to disappear into the floor. Then came the witness request the judge had agreed to review. The prosecution stood.
Your Honor, we are requesting testimony from Miss Alana Reed, an individual who worked under Mr. Combs' production company from 2017 to 2020. Diddy's head snapped up. Alana had stayed quiet for years. She had signed the NDAs, taken the settlements, avoided the press. But apparently, something changed. She was ready to speak. The defense tried to object. Last minute, no relevance, hearsay. But the judge had already made her decision. She'll be heard tomorrow. The judge said, "Make arrangements." That was it. That was the sound of the case turning. Again, back at the plaintiff's table, Cassie didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She simply exhaled, quietly, like someone who had held their breath for years and was finally allowed to breathe again. Because she didn't need to win the internet. She just needed the truth to stand in the same room with her. And now it was.
That night, the courthouse emptied like any other. Security shutting the doors, reporters packing up, flashes from cameras fading into silence. But inside those walls, something had already changed. Because by tomorrow morning, the witness list would include a name no one expected. Alana Reed. And that meant the walls around Diddy weren't just cracking, they were collapsing. Inside his legal team's quarters, the mood was grim. Phones rang without answers. One attorney was seen leaving early, face pale, eyes low. Sources say there was a tense conversation behind closed doors. A disagreement about strategy, about optics, about whether this was still winnable. Diddy's reps had gone silent. The press team that once pushed slick statements and confident quotes now had nothing to offer. And online, the silence wasn't helping.
Social media had turned. Not just against Diddy, but against everyone who stayed quiet too long. Threads were full of receipts, old clips, interviews, body language analysis, interviews resurfacing from the past decade. The public was connecting the dots. But inside the courtroom, where Cassie quietly sat reviewing tomorrow's notes, none of that mattered as much as one thing. She had been heard. No matter what came next, settlement, verdict. Too late, she had stood up in front of the man who once controlled everything and said what needed to be said. And for the first time, the world didn't look away. Tomorrow, Alana would speak. And if her story lined up, if even half of what she carried matched Cassie's, it wouldn't just be a legal case anymore. It would be a pattern, a history, a collapse in real time. Cassie didn't need revenge. She didn't need applause.
She just needed the silence to stop protecting the wrong people. And now it finally had. B told her to stay quiet, told her it was safer, smarter, easier, but she spoke anyway. And in the end, her silence didn't keep her safe. Her voice did. If you felt that, don't just scroll, because there's always another voice waiting for a sign that it's safe to speak. Stick around. The silence is breaking, and the next voice just might need yours.